Hello, it's Ryan Hooper here, and welcome to episode 8 of the Wolves Fancast series, Stories from the Pack. This is really the series created to give fans an opportunity to really have a walk down memory lane, talk about their first experiences with following the clubs, the highs and the lows, and everything in between. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by broadcaster Lynsey Hooper. Lynsey has many strings to her bow, but also in particular, co-founder of the award-winning Offside Pod, which we'll talk about at the moment. But of all titles, I would probably say Wolves fan is probably the best way you want to be described here on this episode. So, Lynsey, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. And yes, that's absolutely how I want to be introduced. And I don't often get to sort of brag about it and talk about it. I try to as much as I can on the offside rule, but no holes barred here. I can say what I like, can't I?
No, absolutely, and this is it really. I mean, just before we go into the details around the series and task you with a few sort of questions before recording, how's things for yourself in lockdown? Obviously, you're heavily involved in the football world. How is it for you at the moment?
Well, it was very quiet, a little bit tumbleweed, to be honest. I mean, of course, the main thing is families are fine, friends and different people I know are all doing okay. My other half works in the NHS, and that's been quite a strain as well. But I think overall, from a work perspective, it's been quite tough because the 13th of March was my last day at work, and then live sports ceased to exist from that point. In particular, football, and the conversations, of course, still ongoing as to how that's going to be concluded. But thankfully, I have got a few other strings to my bow that I've been able to lean on. One of them is a sports radio show that's been commissioned with help from the Audio Content Fund. That's called The Show Must Go On. And I've been doing that for the last 5 weeks, which has been a godsend in terms of just having some focus and something to do. And I'm just like you, I'm fascinated by people, and to interview so many people that should have been lighting up our screens this summer. Olympians, Paralympians, Wimbledon players to come, lots of different people, and hearing what they've been going through has been really inspiring. So I've enjoyed doing that.
Fantastic, and I think this is it really in terms of we're at pause at the moment. Obviously, with football, as you're saying, at time of recording, and likely, in terms of when it goes out, we're just ready to know when it's safe to go ahead. We'll do so, and we're all obviously keen for it when we can. But what it does do, I guess, is give us an opportunity here, really to discuss a lot of things off the field, really, in terms of the fan experience, which is what we're looking at now, and I know also that the offside pod that's continuing as well at the moment. So, just tell me about a little bit more about the offside rule pod and how that came about.
Well, it was in its infancy. It started out as something a little bit different, actually. I started it at Sky Sports around 8 years ago with my friend Kate Borsay. And the very first few episodes was an interview with someone from the media. In fact, fellow Wolves fan Jackie Oatley had been on it. I'd had an interview on it with different managers, one of which being Laurie Sanchez, for instance. And then there was this middle section, which was a round table discussion with friends. And it happened to be that all my friends that I invited on were female. And a producer just pointed out to me, you know what, no one else is doing this. There aren't three women who know football talking about football. And so it just seemed like something to run with. And we made that the whole premise of the podcast, which I know that you've been kind enough to listen to a few episodes. And it's about 30 to 40 minutes long. We just talk football, but it's very unintimidating chat. The idea is that it's quite lifestyle-y. It's a little bit more of the female slant and the way that we think, rather than just maybe stats all the time, which people pretend to think that that's all that the males do. I mean, I know that's not the case, but if you listen to a lot of men's podcasts, I suppose it can be a little bit daunting for some people. So we hope to fill that gap.
No, absolutely. I think, as I say, purely from a listener point of view, what I love about the podcast as I'm getting into it is the fact that it's light, it's sincere, it's gentle. You can tell there's that that you're friends. And I think, as you say, in terms of what we try and do with a fan cast as well, I've never played the game, so I find it difficult to scrutinise tactics and formations. And I know there's places for it, but what I can talk about is my experiences and talk between friends, and that's what we're doing really on this series, really, just to talk as fans and not be so analytical about what's happening on the pitch, but knowing that football is so much more than that, and how it's impacted on all of our lives. So that's the current. So if we start obviously where we always do at the beginning for yourself, Lynsey. What's your first memories of being a fan? And were you born into a Wolves household, or tell me a little bit about that?
I was born into half of a Wolves household. This is horrible to admit. My dad is a West Bromwich Albion fan,
Right. Yeah.
and all of my mum's side of the family are Wolves fans. My granddad used to be a scout at Wolves, and he also had a real affection to the club. He knew Graham Hughes very, very well. And he introduced me to Wolves at a very early age. There was not going to be, with my granddad, who also used to be a striker, and he managed local teams as well in the West Midlands. There was never going to be any other choice. He was sports mad. I was going to be a Wolves fan. My dad didn't try anything. My dad, he sort of tries to fall into that camp of likes to see Midlands teams doing well. Although I do remind him that you can't really support both.
It's funny, isn't it? The dynamic. I mean, it's for myself as well. My wife's an Albion, born into an Albion family. She's not really a fan. I think she's again. I think just probably for the easy life. She loves it when Wolves are doing well because she can see sort of how things are in the house when they're not. So she's joined that sort of journey with me, and I think that's part of it. But it's there are a lot of those family dynamics where you could go one way or the other. So do you remember what was the first game? So did your dad not take you to the game with his allegiances, or what would you say?
No, because my dad really likes football, but he
Mm,
isn't a huge supporter or follower. He didn't have a season ticket. He wasn't obsessed with it like my uncle and my granddad were.
yeah.
And so my earliest memory, rather than the first game I went to, I was about 8 years old, and my mum and dad used to go and do the weekly shop at the Sainsbury's in Wolverhampton.
Mm.
And they used to drop me off to avoid taking, a screaming child around supermarkets. They used to drop me off at my nan and granddad's. And I was always told, no talking when you're at granddad's, he's listening to the sport. And so one of my earliest memories, I used to fill in his coupon for him with all the football scores. And I remember, actually, it was a Black Country derby with West Brom on the radio at my granddad's house. It was the old second division. And I remember Wolves, Andy Much, who was one of my favourite players that I used to like hearing. He scored an equaliser, made it 2-2. And we're going back probably, giving away my age. So it's about 1990. And I remember being really gripped and sitting near my granddad and listening intently and just thinking, this is for me. I just love it. And so it used to be quite a ritual that I used to go there on a Saturday, fill it out, listen to the commentary that was on the radio that week. And then eventually I got to go to a match with my uncle and my cousin when I was about 12.
Brilliant. And do you remember who we played on that first game at all?
Yes, it was a pre-season friendly, and it was Manchester United.
Yeah.
I had a ticket in the Jack Harris stand. I think it was the first sellout ahead of that season. I mean, literally everyone, it felt to a 12-year-old who was going for the first time as well. Like everybody was there. It was really rammed. And I had a stomach bug that day. So I wasn't feeling very well. I got to know the concourse and the toilets pretty well with my uncle having to dive out. I don't think I was his favorite person because I think every 15, 20 minutes I had to go out. But I loved it. And I was so ecstatic because Steve Bull scored. But it wasn't the goal of the game because Carl Robinson scored an absolute belter. But Steve Bull did score, and he's my favourite player at the time, and scored a header. And I know, no, it wasn't actually. It was a lob. He lobbed Schmeichel. It was the header against Bradford that I saw. But yeah, he lobbed Schmeichel, and I loved it. It was just brilliant. Everyone around us, the way that everyone was so friendly, talking to each other. And when my uncle was saying, "Oh, it's their first game," we were getting a lot of people just trying to convert us there and then. But I didn't need much convincing, to be honest.
Brilliant. I think I remember that game because, as you say, that would have probably been early 90s, as you say. And I think it was a time where maybe it was Graham Taylor era, maybe, or maybe just prior to that, where we'd probably had a bit of an investment. And it's crazy now that I guess Man United at that time was probably more of a novelty for a generation, whereas now we've played them in the present so
Mm.
often. But at that time, I think, as you say, the stadium had been recently developed, and there was a big buzz. So a brilliant game. So, what were your first impressions of Molineux in terms of the stature and, as you say, very welcoming? Did you get that buzz straight away? It's like, oh, this is what I've been hearing on the radio, and this is wow, this is something else.
Yeah, and we had a big walk around the stadium. See, I'd never been there in the build up to kickoff. So I'd been around the stadium. I'd been there many times to go and have a look around. But I'd never been there when all fans were outside on different concourses. And that experience just made it completely different. And I think for a 12-year-old walking under the huge underpass that everyone knows for away fans, which is so daunting, I remember coming through there and thinking, wow, it's like at the end of the rainbow, there's the pot of gold. And of course, it was gold as well. I was so elated to be going to my first football match. And to be honest with you, I was a little annoyed that it had taken that long because I'd been talking about it for some Christmases. But yeah, it was one of those experiences as well to do it with my cousin. We played football together in the park. He was a goalkeeper and I used to play outfield. So we loved talking about it together as well. And he loved Neil Emblem.
Good player.
Yeah, he was really obsessed with him. So I remember that really well. And yeah, I think the general atmosphere was such a buzz for a pre-season friendly, that I went away wanting to go back as soon as possible.
Brilliant. And I think just picking up on that, and I know we're incredibly biased, but we can be because this is kind of what the podcast is about, and ultimately the Wolves fans listening. But when you talk about the subway and the ground, there is something about Molineux, and you've probably been to far more grounds than probably I've been to with your career as well. But there's something about the fact that it's situated, that it's in the city centre, and that you walk from town, you come under that underpass, and then it all just opens up in front of you. It's not one of these Meccano stadiums. It's there and it's in the heart of the city. It just creates that feeling on match day, and that must be something that you must still get that buzz when you go to the ground as a fan or through
Yeah.
work.
See, I park often where the TV compound is nowadays, which is just opposite where the megastore is. But I do that walk round the side past the Billy Wright statue on the left-hand side, and I can't get enough of that walk, purely because of the way that fans gather there. That statue is a bit of a magnet, and rightly so. But also that's where all the coaches pull in and all the players sign different autographs. There's such a hub of activity, and really that sets you up for this is the beginning of a great afternoon. And nowadays it usually is a great one.
I know, and this is it. And it's still weird. It's kind of being a Wolves fan now. I don't know how you feel. There are moments where I'm like, is this really, really happening? And I'm like, no, stop. This is the now. Yes, it is. They are absolutely built for being this successful. But I don't know if, and we'll probably go into it in a moment when we talk about your history as following the club. But when we know there's been other periods in the time, it just makes it so worthwhile. And it's like, yeah, we deserve this, And also, I think it's a message for all supporters who are going through tough times that, it's cliche, the out of darkness come of light, but we've seen that so much with Wolves. So, no, it's really brilliant times at the moment. And in the early days for you, Lynsey, who were the standout players? You mentioned bullying much. Were those two? Were there any others that you
Yeah,
think?
there were quite a few actually. I mean, those were two that stood out. And I have to say, I was as big a fan of Andy Much as I was Steve Bull at the time. I thought he was incredible. I suppose looking back over the years, Alex Ray, you know what, I liked a lot of the hard players.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
liked the tough tacklers. I liked Alex Ray. I liked Kevin Muscat. I really liked Stephen Ward as well for the fact of how versatile he was as a player and how long he stayed with us. Robbie Keane in terms of a younger player coming through that I'd watched very early and thought, he will go all the way. And in terms of players that we bought in, we'd gone through quite a torrid time. We'd spent quite a lot of money as well, actually, I think the season before. And then, if you remember, on free transfers, we bought in Paul Ince and Dennis Irwin. And I love both of them equally. So it was fantastic to see those caliber of players coming to Wolves, coming to Molineux. Another fullback I really liked, Andy Thompson, and I see him quite a lot at Molineux. He's a big Wolves fan, and I always look at him and think I remember watching you in midfield running around and as a fullback. So I think it's just all of those players that sort of ingrain on your memory. I don't want to sound like I'm too focused on strikers, but because I think that's the way that most people are. But Stephen Fletcher was another striker that I really liked to watch. And in goal, Matt Murray, probably because of the penalty save in the playoffs. And I think he was a brilliant goalkeeper, but we've had some lovely goalkeepers over the years.
No, we've been lucky. We absolutely have. Yeah, I mean, I think people do gravitate to strikers, don't they? Ultimately,
I try not to do that myself, but you do end up doing it because you remember goals, don't you?
Yeah, you do. But yeah, I mean, some of those players, they're just real fantastic players that I'm sure many listeners can resonate. And, it's quite interesting. Sort of, you started with the Man United connection, and then, as you say, not so long ago, into Irwin, and that was a real moment for us. So, no, fantastic. I mean, in terms of we always look because of the roller coaster of Wolves, and we're a perfect example of that is sort of the highs and the lows. So we'll perhaps end this part on the positive. So if we start with perhaps the lowest moment, or was there a point when you were supporting Wolves when you thought either, why am I doing this? Or did you think, God, I can't see us getting out of this mire that we're in? Was there a particular time that springs to mind where, yeah, you thought, God, this isn't great?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that stand out the most, 2006, 2007, that season when we were in the Championship alongside West Brom, and they beat us 4 times, twice in the playoffs. And I just thought, oh no, we're never going to live this down. And because so many of my extended friends and family and people that I went to school with supported them, it was just one of those where you just thought noisy neighbours are just never going to hear the end of it. So I remember being really downbeat on that occasion. But, we'd gone toe to toe with them throughout that season, and they were the ones that had been relegated from the Premier League. So I suppose there were still positives to try and take from that. Lowest moments crosses over with my broadcasting career, and it's got to be the double drop to League One. The 2-0 defeat to Brighton sent us down, but I remember the game before that against Burnley. That was it. We were going. And that home defeat, I just felt a bit sick to the stomach. But it had been coming because I'd actually reported on the Forest game. Now, this was going back to about March, I think. Dean Saunders in charge. We lost 3-1. I quizzed him after the game and a little bit of the fan came out. The only occasion when I've done that with a manager, but I just was asking him where a goal's going to come from. And I think he picked up on the fact that I was a Wolves fan. And I felt that the club was in free fall and it could just keep going. I don't know about you, but I just thought the bottom could drop out here. There is just nothing coming in, no way of trying to steady this ship. So when we were relegated, it was really no surprise. I just felt so low. And I just felt for all of us that are in it together, that had been going for so many years, seeing all that progress that had happened under Mick McCarthy. And then in the matter of no time, it was all unstitched, really. Stella Solbakken and Dean Saunders, and no offence, and I'd tell them to their faces, but 2 of the worst appointments we've ever had.
It was bizarre, really, as you say. The Premier League. Don't get me wrong. We were kind of, we had our heads slightly above water, didn't we, in the last couple of years in the Premier League, and perhaps there were sides who were recruiting a little bit better than we did. But yeah, I mean, to go from where we were, as you say, in those couple of years, it does interest me, as you say, with the job that you do. That is it difficult to separate that? I've got to ask you. Obviously, I've seen you on the TV when you're at a game, but I guess you just go into professional mode, but you can't take that Wolves coat off, can you? Ultimately, I guess.
No, and I've been quite honest about saying I don't really like when I'm doing final score where you're doing match updates throughout the game, doing Wolves matches for those. And that purely is for the reason that I watch Wolves differently to when I watch a neutral match. And I hold my hands up with that. There are many, many colleagues of mine and professionals like Jackie Oatley, for instance, who do it admirably. And maybe they're just better than me. But I really struggle to do that because I watch off the ball activity a lot more when I'm watching Wolves. I'm watching what other players are doing, the movement, the triangles. Are we in the right spaces? And it really occupies my mind. So yes, I have to really ditch that if I end up reporting on them for the BBC, which I have done on a few occasions, but I've only ever done 3 or 4 matches. And the one match when I went and did that post-match interview for the Football League show with Dean Saunders, I probably let myself down a little because I was quite hard on my questioning. Now, in comparison to probably how I would have been if I wasn't a fan, Now, I'm always at Wolves now. So I do most home matches for the Premier League World Feed, and that's doing the interviews for around the world. So as soon as the full-time whistle goes, we get players down the tunnel and I will start interviewing them. And I find that fine because the activity, the match has finished. I've got that moment to compose my thoughts, and then I'm absolutely fine. So I love doing that. I love doing the European nights, which I've been hosting at Molineux. And again, when I'm doing it for Wolves, I then have to get into the habit of saying we an hour more because I've been so programmed not to do that.
Mm.
That suddenly, Charlie and Russell are saying, you can say hours. That's fine. And I'm like, yes, of course. I'm just going to remind myself. But yeah, I think it is a difficult thing to be able to do. I mean, I would like to think that I can still be professional and do it, but there's definitely an element of not watching it in the same way, I would say.
Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, in terms of going on a positive note, obviously we know things are great now. What's if it can be a single or it can be a number of moments. Where would you pinpoint as a fan the best sort of experience you've had to date following Wall?
Oh, well, following Wolves, you say best experiences, and I immediately want to be there, and that's been in
Mm,
the last few seasons. So I'll come on to that. But first of all, my best experience following from afar when I was at university and I was doing my dissertation and in my final year, that was 2003, and it was the first time that we'd been promoted back to the top flight in my lifetime. So, it was under Dave Jones. It hadn't happened before, and I was meant to be writing this very detailed essay of about 10,000 words. And I remember sat glued to the screen watching the playoff final, us beating Sheffield United 3-0, and also being so comprehensive in the way that we won that match. It was also at the Millennium Stadium, if you remember, because I always thought that we were cursed at Wembley, like the amount of playoffs, but we won this one. And it's still the only success. I think that was what made it even more special was the fact it came in the playoffs. We won that way and we got that day of celebration. And that was it. I was out on the town that night. And I didn't do my dissertation that evening. I did get it in, but it probably could have scored higher. Who knows?
I think as well, and as you say, we can touch on sort of the present, but just touching on that there, you referenced earlier the season with the Albion when they surpassed us, and also the heartache in the playoffs, and I think that's what made it so good, didn't it? Really, that playoff win at Cardiff. Time of recording, 17 years ago today, it was the playoff final, and it's absolutely crazy in terms of just within that sort of cycle how the clubs gone up and gone down and has obviously got to a good level now. But yeah, I think that was such a defining moment because it was the first time. We know we went down thereafter, but it was the famous banner with how many days and minutes to the point
Mm.
we're in the top league. And as you say, for a generation as well, and a few generations, the Premier League was something we watched on TV. So it was such a
Yeah, and that promotion was the one I got to enjoy with my granddad. You see,
mm,
my granddad died when I was around 25, 26, but that was the one we got to enjoy together. And I also was so happy for Sir Jack in the fact that
mm,
he got that too. And you look at the days now and oh wow, are they amazing. But I don't know, there's something about those old days as well and that first promotion. I think it will be hard to top. And then in terms of other memories, I used to volunteer at Radio Wolves when it was based in Molineux Stadium. So you had the regular match commentators were Bill Hatton and Pete Moody.
okay,
And
yeah,
do you remember them?
oh
And I
yeah,
used to go out and I used to give them halftime results for all of the matches elsewhere in the West Midlands to read out. And I used to top and tail a bit of the highlights from the match commentary. And this is when I was about 14, 15. And I was there and I watched Steve Bull score his 300th goal against Bradford. That was the header. And
yeah,
and that was Carl Robinson scoring. I always get these all confused, but that was Carl Robinson, wasn't it? Where he scored the volley as well, I think, in that one. And I honestly was so elated to see that and be there. I still to this day really laugh when I think of the white t-shirt he revealed underneath and it had like biro or pen. You'd think
yeah.
after all of that service,
Was
they'd
it
get him
300
something
not out
printed.
or something? Sorry,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. But oh wow, the crowd, Molyneux went absolutely wild because we wanted that for him. We wanted him to
Mm.
reach 300. You know, he'd toyed with going to Coventry at one point, and I think every single Wolves fan, when they were in the Premier League, were just like, "Go and experience it, go and do it, because you've been so great." But he was like, "No." So when that moment came, I remember just losing my concentration. I think I was meant to be noting something down and a time code or something, and yeah, I'd forgot.
It's great though, Lindsay, because I think what picking up there, I think in terms of my experience as a fan, I find it really interesting at what point to date, and I believe we'll have many more years supporting the Wolves, that you're that emotionally invested. I mean, through different circumstances, I've not always held a season ticket, and I've kind of gone away from the game. Always been a fan, but not been so involved. Or there's been a time where I've had the disposable income that I've gone home and away, and I think that there's points, and I remember that game, and I was in the north. I'm sure it was the North Bank. He got the 300th goal, actually.
It was, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so I do remember it because I had a season ticket there, and I think just so iconic, wasn't he, Bully?
Mm.
I know Wolves fans don't need us to kind of chronology, but we'll always talk Bully because I mean, God, just at that time, at that era, he just captivated everyone. He was the whole. We do this series, about being from the pack, and it might sound a bit twee and cheesy, but I don't care because actually it's really relevant because I think Bully felt he was kind of the leader of the pack, and I know
Mm.
again that sounds cheesy, but it's so true because he just seemed to represent it, and we, as you say, we felt his pain when things didn't work for him as well.
And part of that tale for me as well was joining Radio Wolves in this sort of voluntary role, trying to get some experience and starting out on my media career, really. I was so excited at getting to do that because I'd get to watch him. But then he was injured, if you remember. So just before that, he'd been out for 3.5 months, and I
Mm.
hadn't actually seen him. And he was on 299, and everyone was just waiting. So I think it was that explosion and overload because of that build up too.
Brilliant. And in terms of the current day, is this the best side you've seen in your lifetime?
Oh, easily, without
Yeah.
a shadow of doubt. And I thought that the first season this time back in the Premier League, I thought that was going to be the best. I was there when Neves scored on the opening day against Everton, that free kick, and it just started as it meant to go on. And I remember thinking it isn't going to get better than this, but I think that this season that's just been interrupted, we were at an even better level, and that surprised me. It really did. I thought if we could maintain it, fantastic, but I expected maybe to slip. You know, when all of your friends are talking and saying, "Where do you think Wolves will finish?"
Mm.
And last season, I did say I thought that they might be in the top 8, and then this time I lowered it to top 10, and actually we were even better.
I know it's brilliant, isn't it? It really is, and I think football comes in cycles, as we talked about with the ups and downs. But you just have to live in and revel the moment, really, and it gives us an opportunity now to do that because this is just incredible what we're seeing right now. In terms of um, the title of this is Stories from the Pack, and you're very much part of the pack. And for yourself, what does being part of the pack mean to you? I know, obviously, as a broadcaster, you'll see Wolves in a slightly different light, but ultimately, you're part of the pack. What does being part of the pack mean to yourself, Lindsay?
It means everything. I get goosebumps when I'm at Molineux, and also if you're walking through the interior of the stadium, there's so many quotes on the walls about being part of that pack. And when everyone sings "Si Senor," for instance, you just get wrapped up in it. And it doesn't matter whether I'm there with my professional hat on or if I'm there as a Wolves fan. I can't help but just feel that and get so moved. And just around you, I love the friendliness anyway of Black country people. It's something that I don't think can be replicated anywhere. And I may have moved out of the area because of my job, but it is something I miss so much. So going back to Wolves reconnects me with home. It
Mm.
reconnects me with my granddad and those memories, and it makes me feel so great inside. Um, and no one can ever take those away from you. And all of us that are there experiencing different experiences, but at the same time, and that unites us. Um, and when I've been in London and I've seen so many people with different Wolf shirts on, or I've been traveling to other games, and I always stop and I always chat. And a lot of the time, lots of Wolves fans, I don't know whether you found this, they chose Wolves as a club, certainly down south, when they were younger because they like the shirt or
Yeah,
they like the
yeah,
badge.
yeah.
And then they'll be so overwhelmed when I'll say, no, I'm in Wolverhampton. I went to school in the West Midlands. They really love to connect with real Wolverhampton fans. And I'm not saying that they're not. I just think that they like the Black Country roots as well, and talking to us about it and talking about the stadium, like you say, being in the centre of the city and growing up there and growing up, seeing footballers on nights out once upon a time when we were night clubbing, Robbie Keane would be there, different people. And you just go back over the years, and there's some great memories.
No, it's brilliant, and I think this is it really. As I mentioned earlier in the pod, we shouldn't apologise for being biased, but there is something about this club, and it's something about, as you say, how it bonds people together. And you're right. I speak to many people who I think, there's generations who perhaps have family who watched the team in the 50s, and the iconic gold shirts and the floodlight games and so forth. And as you say, London is a huge actually base for Wolves fans as well. Every time I go to the Capital away games, there's a very well run London supporters club. And I think a lot of that came from that era in the 70s and so forth. But it does just connect, and it's just great talking Wolves. And it's one of those, football's like this generally anyway. I remember sort of going travelling and sitting in a bar in Melbourne, and I was on my own, and there was a guy in there, and he'd got one of the full nine shirts. It was one of those, he had like his own merchandise range. You probably remember Bully. He had like the 9 and the 306, and he had one of those t-shirts on. It was like, oh God, one of us. And that's, you get that, and it was such a broad spectrum, but it's lovely to hear. And I guess you must be really sort of proud that, more than ever, you must get quizzed, certainly on a work level, about Wolverhampton, perhaps, and the team with how we're doing now.
Oh, all the time now. No one would listen to me at one point, and now they don't want to stop talking about it. And I do think that there's something about Wolves that makes them everyone's sort of second team at the moment. It used to be the case with Leicester when they had that fantastic season and won the league, but there is a real affinity towards Wolves, and I think it's because of the sorts of football that we're playing. It's attractive on the eye. It's the sort of football that we all dream of being at our own club. We're pinching ourselves; it's at ours. But if you're not one of the top big six, to see a team playing the way that we're playing and bringing through some of the players that we are, I think it's exciting for any football fan to see a club taking that on, and also with very much a long-term view. I really see this project as being a long-term one. And people said, oh, you might have your season in the Europa League. Well done. No. We're going to be in Europe, and we'll be in and out of Europe for a few years, I think.
And I think this is the thing, and I think most people kind of on the mainstream level are kind of buying into it. But we do a few things with via the fan cast, and we speak to like national radio and so forth. And I used to get asked, I say used to, oh God, it's coming back. But I get asked, oh, what about if a big club comes in for Nuno or what? I'm like, hang on, we are a big club, and I'm not. And I have to be objective about it and go, okay, yeah, we're not Real Madrid, we're not. But the honest answer to that is, well, become a big club. And I think it's a little bit naive, those outside of it, who just kind of see Wolves and the last, they don't see, as you said, the project and perhaps what we're privy to in terms of the work going on behind the scenes. So I think you're right. I think,
And I don't think that situation right now would happen, which happened with Mick McCarthy, which was another low point, by the way, when he got sacked, purely for the reasons that not only had he had a great 5.5 years at the club, but there was no plan in place. And there were rumours for people like Rafael Benitez. I think Alan Kirbishley was on the list. I remember they got very, very desperate and tried to get Walter Smith to come down at one point. And we ended up with Dallas Solbakken. That wouldn't happen now. And you're right, when Rafa Benitez was on that list and everyone laughed before, they wouldn't laugh at it now.
No, it just shows where we are. So no, we're all so excited, as we mentioned earlier, for when football can commence. It was a strange feeling really when sort of lockdown started, because I thought if any team needs a break, it's us. But then also when I was chatting to someone the other day, they said, no, we're being robbed of someone like Joe Moutinho and those moments in his career.
Yes.
So, we know football is only part of life, and we know, and we'll bow down to the authorities when they give us the go ahead. So when it's safe to do so, we'll be happy, and we'll have more memories to come as well. Just in closing, thank you everybody for the support of the podcast. What we're trying to do really is, while we're in this period, is give people as much content as possible. So we've got the alternative Hall of Fame running at the moment. The latest episode with Michael Kitely is out as well. We've got the film cast, and we're continuing with this series of stories from the pack. So, Lynsey, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to come on, and I just hope that we continue to enjoy these lovely heights we've been experiencing. Let there be more. Let there be more European nights at Molineux as well.
Brilliant. Well, until next time, stay safe and stay well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank
Bye.
you.